Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. For this video, I'm going to take a look at the upcoming ComicConnect Event Auction. Bidding begins on September 9th, 2024 and ends September 30th. This auction features selections from the Ruben Blades collection, some of which are true collector's comics. There are plenty of obvious keys, but the breadth of the collection is really impressive, and I'll be pointing out a couple of great examples in this video. As an aside, and as a teaser for next week, I personally have had great experiences selling with ComicConnect over the years, and I'm going to post a video next week talking about one of those auctions, including a walkthrough of some of the books I sold there. Spoilers, there will be some high-grade Daredevils. It'll be fun to go down a little trip down memory lane for that one. Anyway, let's get started with this preview. First up, we've got Detective Comics #1, CGC 2.0 Qualified. This book has a married centerfold, and some other restoration, actually. This is one of those true collector books I was talking about. It's an impressive book. Any copy of Detective 1 is impressive, and it tells a story of how deep Ruben Blades' collection goes. As Detective 1 is tough to find, there are 37 in the census, and for many collectors, other more obvious and or hot books get in the way of hunting down the first issue of the flagship DC title. That said, it's iconic, important, and just a great book overall. By the way, in researching this video, I realized there's no one with a complete Detective 1 to 26 set in the CGC registry. The best set is missing 12 and 15. I know that the two people who compiled complete DC collections must have had 1 to 26, and Metropolis, before they had their auction arm, ComicConnect, once offered an unbroken run of 1 to 40 on eBay. That was from a single consigner, so I know that that person had this run. But I wonder how many other people have accomplished that feat. It's a very high-level collecting goal, and, to accomplish it is crazy. These books are not common, and they're not superhero books, so they don't come up as often. People who have them in their attic don't necessarily recognize that they're something that somebody would want, because Superman isn't on the cover, Batman isn't on the cover. So this is one of those things, when you set out to do it, you really know you're in for a challenge. Next up is Suspense Comics #3, Restored, CGC 4.0. There are only 43 copies of this book in the census, so, like Detective Comics #1, this is a tough book to find in any condition. Unlike Detective Comics #1, however, this book is much higher priority on the want lists of a lot of collectors because of the incredible Alex Schomburg cover. I'm interested to see where this one ends up, as I often am with Suspense #3. Books like this are hard to value, especially Restored, as there are so few comparables. It just doesn't sell that often, so you just never know where it's going to go. This is also interesting because it's a great, quote-unquote cheap copy, which means it won't be all that cheap. This is the first of a couple books in this auction that will benefit from a larger relative bidding pool, meaning, they're lower grade, they're restored, which means that they're more affordable, which means that more people that want the book might be able to afford it, which means there might be more competitive bidding. We'll see. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. Here we've got Catman Comics #13, CGC VG-3.5. This is another rarity, and this one is even tougher than the previous two books. Famously not pictured in the Gerber Photojournal Guide of American Comics, this tough book, only 25 in the census, is the standard bearer for an impossibly tough run to put together. Catman is truly a crazy series to try to complete. The CGC census on this title is insane. Let's look at some examples of just the number of unrestored copies. There are 52 copies of #1, 22 of #2, 29 of #3, 24 of #4, 19 of #5, 11 unrestored copies of #6, 19 copies of #7, 15 copies of #8, 15 copies of #9, 18 copies of #10, 16 copies of #11, 20 copies of #12, 21 copies of number 13. Wow, it's so easy to find. 26 copies of number 14, and 9 copies of number 15. And it goes like that all the way through the last issue of the title. There's only one near-complete Catman set on the CGC registry. It's missing 13 and, not surprisingly, 15. And the rest of the sets in the registry are just a handful of books. This is a title that, if you're collecting it, you need to buy every copy that comes up for sale, regardless of condition, because you could be waiting for a while for another copy. For example, GPA has 3 sales, 3 total, for number 15 since 2002. Soon there will be a 4th. And here it is, Catman Comics, number 15, CGC, very fine near mint 9.0. Edgar Church copy. This exact book sold for $6,325 in 2002 and comes from the collection of Nick Cage. It's still in the first generation holder with the Nick Cage notation and everything. What on earth will this sell for? It received offers of up to $24,000 through Heritage's Make an Offer system, but that seems way too low for a Church copy of one of the toughest books out there. So, we'll see. Could be exciting. One last Catman before I move on. This is Catman Comics, number 32, CGC 5.0. This classic cover is the one book from the title that I'd be really interested in owning myself, which is great because at 38 copies in the census, it's one of the easiest books of the title to find. Maybe not. Let's take a look at a piece of original art. This is a Frank Miller page from Daredevil 172. This page is super memorable to me from my youth. It's got everything you would want from a Daredevil page from this era. Daredevil, Bullseye, Kingpin, Turk. I will actually describe how impactful Miller's Daredevil run was on my collecting life next week, but for now, know that it was a huge deal. There's not much comic art from the 80s that means more to me personally than a great example of Miller on Daredevil, and this is a great example. Next up, we've got Flash Comics number 1, CGC 1.8, Restored. Someone, somewhere, maybe more than someone, just had their wish granted. They've always wanted a Flash Comics number 1, but they don't have a huge budget. This is their copy. This is the second book in this auction that will benefit from an expanded bidding pool, at least the second book that I'm talking about at least. Something like this, both low grade and restored, will probably have a lot of pressure on the final hammer price because the number of available bidders for a Flash Comics number 1 is going to be maxed out on this book. There are just a handful of people who could step up to the plate for the Church copy in 9.6 or whatever, but there are a lot more people interested in just owning a copy, any copy, of this book. This is their best shot. This is one I love. Detective Comics number 27, CGC 7.0, Restored. I remember when the questions I asked about comics were things like, when will every unrestored copy of Action number 1 and Detective 27 sell for more than $100,000? Or, when will every copy, restored or not, of Action number 1 and Detective 27 sell for more than $100,000? At some point, we'll be talking about every unrestored copy of these books selling for over $1 million. We've actually lost some ground on that front as the CGC 4.5 sold for $1.14 million in January 22, and then sold for $675,000 in June of this year. Both sales were at Heritage. On a positive note, this restored copy of Detective 27 might sell for more than the $350,000 JP the Mint paid for the Marvel Comics number 1 pay copy to set the world record way back in 2003. The lesson? The long-term trends are still good. It took us a long time to get from that $350,000 sale to a new world record and eventually a $1 million sale. So if we have some hiccups, we have some hiccups. We've come a long way. And all of that out of the way, I'm always excited when a Detective 27 comes up for auction. It's my favorite book in the whole hobby, so let's get the popcorn out. Here's another book I love. Sensation Comics number 1, CGC 7.0. I love this book in general and have long said that if Wonder Woman's first appearance had this cover, it would be much closer in value to Action Comics #1 and Detective 27. It's gotten closer over the years, but All-Star 8 is definitely held back because the star of the book, Wonder Woman, isn't on the cover, especially with an iconic image like this. Also, in looking at values for this book in particular, I found a crazy hot potato copy from a decade or so ago. It was another CGC 7.0, serial number 09630811001. So I haven't actually compared the two, but I'm assuming it's a different book than this one. It went through an odyssey. All of these results are from GPA, so I'm not actually sure where all of the sales happened, but it was pretty crazy. So August 5th, 2010, it sold for $9,859. In June 7th of 2011, it sold for $12,000. So somebody did pretty well on that. July 1st, so almost a year later, it sold for $6,000. So somebody took a bath. December 8th, 2012, so this is the second sale in 2012. It sold for $8,300. Not bad. And then September 7th, 2013, it sold for $9,200. So it's so many winners and losers in that over, just a couple of years. And really, it ended up in the same ballpark. It went from $9,800 to $9,200, even though it changed hands a bunch of times. So I always think those are funny. Again, I've talked about it before, hot potato books, and some books just sit in collections forever. So that was definitely a hot potato book for a while, but I believe it's just sat in a collection since, unless it's sold at Comic Link, who doesn't report to GPA. Here's a fun one. Daring Mystery Comics #1, CGC 9.2, Windy City copy. This gorgeous book sold for $46,500 just over 10 years ago. Now you know. I've always loved this Schomburg cover, so I just wanted to share this killer copy. Let's zoom in for a minute and take a look at the full glory of it. Fun times. Now we've got X-Men #50, CGC 9.8, Boston copy. I talked about Boston copies last week in another context, but at the time I did mention that they are generally very nice copies. This classic cover and key X-Men book is no exception. I never really collected Silver Age X-Men. I'm not sure why, as Uncanny was my first main title when I was a kid. X-Men 138 was my first back issue. But this book has always been a favorite. So, the green cover has always just kind of blown my mind. And I would love to see this one in person because I'm sure it pops. As a note, I just saw the Don Maggie Thompson copy of this book sold for $28,111 in December of 2021. That's almost 4 times the highest price paid for any other 9/8. $7,200 for the Oakland copy last year. This copy will sell for something closer to the hammer price of the Oakland copy, I think. I think we're hitting on a trend here as I go through GPA for the last few years, picking out crazy outliers as I look at current auctions. I think this is the 3rd time that it's happened. Now we've got Wolverine #1, CGC 9.9. One of my first tasks at Superhero Universe in Boston when I started there was sorting something like 500,000 comics. We had boxes and boxes and boxes of back issue stock that were on this kind of second story balcony. And I went from one corner of the store to the other, going through every box, sorting them alphanumerically. And, part of that job was to immediately put aside any interesting or valuable books. I eventually had to integrate all, 200 boxes into one long alphanumeric sort. So if you've ever done anything like that, I'm sure your fingers are feeling it for me. Anyway, I saw a lot of cool stuff doing that job, but the single most memorable moment was pulling out full white boxes, one after the other, 250 to 300 copies of the Wolverine Limited miniseries. It was issues 2, 3, and 4. There were maybe 50 copies of #1, but it wasn't a full box. At that point, the title was only a few years old, maybe 5 or 6, something like that. but it was still a valuable book, so it was pretty crazy to see full long boxes of it. With that anecdote in place, it may not surprise you that there are 39 9.9s and 4 10s of this particular comic. Because I don't think Superhero Universe was the only place putting away stacks of this book when it came out. Wolverine, Miller, it was a no-brainer. I still love it, so always a fun book to see pop up in really high grade. The last book we're going to look at is Wonder Woman #1, CGC 6.5. I love this book, in general. Wonder Woman is an iconic character, and there's a reason they call them the Big Three at DC. This dynamic cover also blows me away every time. Really nice copies with great preservation are really exciting to see. Maybe it's the yellow cover, Superman thing, I don't know, but I'm a fan. With that in mind, I wish I'd taken my own advice a decade plus ago and went all in on Golden Age Wonder Woman. Maybe a #1 or a Sensation #1. I was busy buying Daredevils by the dozen at the time, but I knew that these books were undervalued relative to the importance of the character, and I ignored my own advice. I wrote about it all the time. I don't have many regrets in my collecting life. I generally buy what I like, and I do it for the fun of the chase, even when I know, or at least suspect, that I'm going to end up losing money at the end of it all. Since I don't have unlimited funds, I also know I'm going to miss out on things. That's just how it goes. But still, I wish I'd gone for one. I mean, you win some and you lose some, and I've had a lot of fun collecting what I've collected over the years, but, the ship has definitely sailed on one of these being affordable. Actually, this copy would have been an awesome target at the time, as mid-grade copies in the 2000s, late 2000s, were solidly 4-figure books. This is now a high 5-figure book. Not quite sure where it's going to land, but it'll do well. That's it for now. We'll keep our eyes on these lots as the auction goes live, and I'll see you next week with another video. It'll be my first show and tell. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, because I really enjoy making it.